Hi, everyone. Welcome to the space, Name and Own Who You Truly Are, and have a really cool guest with us today, Gloria Felt. Gloria Felt is the co-founder and president of Take the Lead Women, and she was CEO of National Planned Parenthood for 9 years and had worked with the organization in total for 30 years. So welcome today, Gloria.
Thank you, Neve.
Wonderful to be able to have you come into the space. And full disclosure, the space came as a result of taking the course that I took with Gloria Felt. Gloria Felt's organization is Take a Lead, and it is about reaching gender parity in leadership by 2025. And you offer a course, which I took. And this is really the raison d'etre for us being here today. What you told us during the course was that people had told you that your course was like jet fuel for careers. And I love that image. I took the course, and this summer I took it much slower than I planned. I thought it was going to be, I'd be able to like go through it because I've, read the books, your book, I have taught stuff in leadership, but I realized I had to really slow down. And I had to slow down because what you were having me do was change my perception, understanding of leadership and women in power completely. And it was like turning this very slow ship in the middle of the ocean. And I realized that I had to give myself the time and patience to be able to understand that and grow. So I'd love to know today, like, tell us about the 9 power tools and how they came about.
First of all, Neve, I have to just tell you how it excites me and warms my heart to hear that you're taking the course had that impact for you, because I see that happen more often than not, but you've just articulated it in such a beautiful way. And I hope I get this video clip because I'm going to be using it.
Oh yes, I'll send it to you. Absolutely.
It's great. It's really great. Now, because it is a different kind of leadership course. And I will back up and tell you how it came to be. But I do want to say that, there are thousands of good leadership courses in the world. And there are thousands of good leadership courses that are aimed specifically at women. So one of the things that I realized very early on was that we didn't need to do some of the basics of leadership courses. You can get those anywhere. You can learn strategic planning, you can learn budgeting, you can learn personnel management, you can learn all of those things in a lot of different places. So this course that I designed is really about you. It's because I truly believe the best leaders know themselves very well. So it's more introspective than most. And fundamentally, it is rooted in giving women a different understanding than we have been socialized to have about power and intention. Because I believe that is the breakthrough code cracker, jet fuel, whatever, that can release us to actually have our highest and best intentions. So to back up and tell you how it came to be, after I left Planned Parenthood, after that very wonderful 30-year career, but I was pretty tired, and I really wanted a quieter life, and I wanted to sit behind my computer and write. Because I love to write. Since I was 5 years old, I wrote stories. I've always loved writing. And I wrote some books. And the last book that I wrote was a look at why women hadn't reached parity in leadership in any sector. We were running, and this is like 10 years ago, we were at about 18% of the top leadership positions in every single sector. The data was the same. It didn't matter. Government, corporate, nonprofit, it just didn't matter. Whatever sector you looked at, women were under 20%, about 18%. I'm happy to say that in the years since then, and I hope that in part due to Take the Lead's work, that we are pushing now onto 25%.
Wow.
Although the COVID is actually giving women a big setback, which is the top whole other conversation I won't go into, but we're going to have some help women get back on track and back into their careers. So what I discovered as I was looking at all of the research about why women hadn't reached parity, even though we were about half of the workforce and we were earning 57% of the college degrees, and I could go on and on and on. Oh, and by the way, the case was already clear 10 years ago that companies with more women in their leadership were more profitable. So when you have the business case, you have that plus the justice case, which put those two together, and it's very important. Well, what I came to realize was that women and men we're all socialized in the same culture. So the narrative of history has been one of fighting. Power has been about fighting and having the power over resources that are assumed to be scarce. Well, the truth is that it's in an economy that's based on brains, not brawn. It's not about having power over scarce resources. It's about having the intelligence and the creativity and the innovation to create more resources, to create more technology, to create more of whatever. And the important things, the intelligence, love, things like that, there's no finite pie. And women get that. So when I would ask women to shift their thinking about power from an oppressive idea of power as being the power over them to an expansive and generative idea of power being the power to be what they want to be, do what they want to do, make life better for their families, the world, whatever their personal mission was, I would see masks fall off of their faces. And they would say, well, yeah, I want that. Give me that. Give me that. I want that kind of power. So I wrote this in my book, No Excuses, 9 Ways Women Can Change How We Think About Power. And being a practical person, movement builder, every chapter has a part of, okay, this is what the problem is. This is a part of the problem. This is why it happens. And here are some solutions. And I called those solutions power tools. And people kind of like that and started asking me to teach workshops using it. And so I created a whole curriculum around this shift in how we think about power and the 9 leadership power tools, each of which helps women to have very specific practical skills they can use right away to thrive in the world as it is, but to know they can change it. And I think that's another differentiator of the Take the Lead program, which is you don't just have to fit in to the world as it is. Our institutions were designed by men for men hundreds of years ago when life was very different, and they might have been very functional then. But very often women don't feel comfortable in those organizations and the cultures don't fit. And so they bail out at mid-career. And that's why women weren't walking through those doors, basically, because they didn't see themselves in those leadership positions. They didn't see other role models. And the ones they saw, they didn't particularly like. Many of the first women in those top leadership roles very often were single, very often didn't have children, very often were, women would view them as basically not having a life. And they'd say, well, I don't want to be like that. So they'd bail out. And that meant that the next generation of women was starting all over again, trying, yeah, right. And yet here was all this talent that was being wasted. I just couldn't stand that. So gradually I was persuaded to turn from the book to the workshops to creating the organization Take the Lead. And our mission, as you said, is gender parity in every sector by 2025. And the thing is, we've had really slow incremental change. We started 7 years ago, it was at 18%. And now women are at about 25% of the top leadership roles. And I think that it will be much easier to double more quickly than those incremental steps that it took to do that first wave. So that's where we are. We now have courses that are online, in person, and blended for early career, mid-career, and executive level women. And we do them inside of companies and organizations. We've done some statewide women's leadership initiatives. We've done, we go where we're asked. And I've trained another couple of dozen women who are fabulous and diverse and all over the country and just amazing people to be able to deliver the training and coaching. We now also include coaching. So I don't have to do it all anymore. I have all these great people who can do it. And that's where we are right now. So despite the pandemic, despite having had 2020 was not the year we had expected it to be. It was going to be our scaling up year, but 2021 will be.
So what I think is really interesting about what you just said, Gloria, is the idea of, well, a couple of things. You talked about how it's not a finite pie, right? And clearly what you are doing in the growth of your organization is you're living that and you're showing that because it has just expanded exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece that really spoke to me, and this really spoke to me during the course, was the idea about women having to fit in. So what I want to focus on right now is power tool number 2, define your terms. And when I first read this, like, what on earth does that mean? And the course, you led us through exactly what that meant. So if you could just explain to us, like, what is the thinking behind power tool number 2, define your terms?
Absolutely. Well, let me just start by referencing the shift that I mentioned in how we were thinking about power, from power over to power to. That's one example of how a reframe can change everything. It literally changes how we are seeing the world and how we are thinking about ourselves. So from the sort of meta perspective, power tool number 2, define your own terms, is about setting the agenda yourself, defining the terms of whatever discussion you might be having so that you can move toward the productive outcomes that you want. And those are really important leadership tools. But I think it starts with defining yourself. And so one of the first exercises that we do is we ask you to define yourself for yourself. As Audre Lorde said, if I don't define myself for myself, I will be crushed into other people's fantasies about me.
I love that quote.
And I love that quote too. And so we ask the women to just think about what are the 3 to 5 words that you want to have define you for you. Not how you want the, other people to define you. What do you want? Because first you have to put that energy out into the world. If you want other people to see you in that light. And I love, we have a speech on our website by the amazing Carla Harris, who's managing director of Morgan Stanley. And it's just like one of the best orators I've ever known. But she talks about how being a Black woman on Wall Street was such a challenge initially and how people would react to her and say that she wasn't tough enough to do her job. And she said, well, so for 1 month, I decided tough was going to be my word. And I would talk tough, act tough, walk tough until I started hearing that word come back to me. And then people would say, you know that, Carla? He is so tough. And so it's what do you want your perception to be of yourself? And then you can walk that in the world so that other people will have that same perception of you.
What I found so fascinating about doing this exercise was I so real aligned with my core values, and that's, other work that I've done. And the idea about a core value is like, what are those things in your life that you have to live your life by? They determine and drive your life. And when you're not living your core values, that usually means that, you're not happy. There's some area of discontent in your life or dissatisfaction. So to be able to bring my core values into the define your terms was just such an eye opener for me, because I'd always thought, okay, here are my core values and like they're here, but I've got to keep them in this little box and they have nothing to do with my work. I saw that my role in work was to figure out what was needed out there, and to chisel and change myself, to mold myself to fit in what it was out there. But the out there was always so nebulous, and I could never quite figure out what it was. And I took tons of leadership courses, trying to figure out who I was supposed to be, how I was supposed to like manage people and all that. But the idea when I saw that I could bring my core values and lead with my core values, it was like a transformation. It was like, so I get to bring all those really cool things into everything that I do with people. I mean, the delight and the joy with that, it was transformational. And I have to reset myself on a regular basis because I can feel myself sometimes slipping back into, I've got to be who I think people want me to be, which is ridiculous because you never know what people are thinking. And I've got to make that shift back to my core values and who I am and living that with every single interaction and everything that I do in my work.
I love your description of it as chiseling yourself. And I bet you many women who are looking at this will relate to that. And it is part of that socialization
Yeah.
that I think women have more so than men, to chisel ourselves so that we fit
Yeah.
into a world we did not create, or that we have not been in charge of, let me say. But a couple of things for me. One is just in line with what you're saying about your core values, is that one of the things that I learned from being a CEO for many years. I would never have seen myself, by the way, as being able to be a CEO had I not serendipitously been offered the first position as the CEO of a very small Planned Parenthood affiliate way back when. So sometimes serendipity helps you along in life. But what I discovered very quickly was that I had what you have to take that level of responsibility. And I learned that my core values were integrity
Mm.
and honesty and courage. And that what I had to do was to be willing to step out, be willing to articulate a vision, be willing to articulate the direction I thought the organization should go, to take public stands and private stands that people might or might not like. But if they were within my integrity, what's the worst that could happen? I get fired. And when you're working for a nonprofit board, believe me, every day that's a possibility. But you learn by doing these things. You learn by being willing to take that step. And the other thing I learned, and I actually learned this from a mentor, which is that the fastest route to self-esteem is to stand up for what you believe. And that people actually follow people who have a point of view. So the more you do articulate your values and share them with others, the more they will actually respect you. And they may not agree with you, but they will respect you. And they'll be more likely to be willing to be part of whatever you are working on.
Well, what you just said is exactly what the space is about, Gloria. It's about naming and owning who you truly are. Like, you've got to name yourself in order to understand what it is you want to do. You've got to have the courage to name it and to recognize it, and then own it and say, yes, this is mine, and it resonates with my heart and who I am. Um, and then you take that step and you're like, I'm creating the space. It's like, for me, it's almost like a visceral thing of like, every time I do something that scares me, it's like I am creating the space in front of me and I'm stepping into it, and it is with intentionality that I'm creating that space. So last question is, what have you come to understand about power tool number 2, define your terms?
I have come to understand that I have to rethink it and practice it intentionally almost every day, because I am still very inclined to give away my power to define myself. It has been so deeply ingrained in me. And again, I think this does get better with each passing generation, as each generation of young girls is more likely to be told that she has every right to be whoever she wants to be and can do whatever she wants to do. So I don't want to lay this off on somebody who may say, well, I'm just fine with my power. And I hope you are. I hope you are. But think about it a little bit. Have you brought other women along?
Mm-hmm.
Have you set your boundaries? How have you actually used your power in the service of what those values are? So what I've learned from power tool number 2 basically is, it's not a one and done. I have to think about it every day. I have to be very intentional about it, or I can lose my way really easily, and have to refresh what I'm thinking about that power tool, to remind myself to use it.
And I'm wondering, you're talking about that, like women who say that they do feel powerful, that they are aware of their intentions, who they want to be. I wonder, on some level, do they have internal limits? Have they just at some point decided, well, this is where I want to go, and that is the limit? And if they were to perhaps understand or see their ideas about themselves and power and who they can be by those sort of like unconscious limits that they've set for themselves, that they might be able to expand their power and their possibility in an entirely new way that they'd never even thought of.
Right, right. Yes, and I would just add to that that it's important, I believe, for us as women collectively to always consider how do we embrace power in ways that are healthy?
Hmm.
Because if we just use power as the old narrative, the oppressive narrative,
Yeah.
the power over narrative, what good will it do to have women in leadership? Life will just be like it always was. And then if women can keep that in our own minds and recognize the opportunity and responsibility that we have to literally shift the power narrative for our entire culture, for our companies, for our organizations, for our it really even inside the family,
Yeah.
and shift that power narrative so that everybody can feel that they're part of this freedom
Hmm.
of being able to have an expansive, no limits,
Yeah.
no limits on what you can achieve. You don't have to fight someone else for that crumb. You go bake more pies. You pies. You think of a new kind of a pie to bake, and you can do that. And I hope with all my heart that as women do ascend to increasing numbers and percentages of powerful positions, that we will be intentionally cognizant of that opportunity and that responsibility to shift how the entire world thinks about power. And one other reason for doing that is a very practical one, which is that the very things that have been socialized into women and that we have been told are not positive about ourselves, you know, like like going in packs to things,
Hmm.
and like collaborating and talking a lot, and actually, and being a little more risk averse than men are,
Hmm.
turns out those are the very characteristics that make us so successful, that make businesses that have more women in their leadership
Wow.
more profitable. Because when you have not been the group in power,
Hmm.
as a defense mechanism, as a survival mechanism, you have to learn to use empathy. You have to learn to read the room. You have to learn to collaborate in different kinds of ways. You have to learn to operate across cultures and languages. And those are the skills and characteristics that make organizations most successful in today's volatile world. So I hope that as women, we will remember that and treasure those and build those. I think those are our superpowers now.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, Gloria, thank you so much. This was a pleasure as always. Thank you so much for giving me your time and your brilliance and insights into your nine power tools.
Absolute pleasure, Neve. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye bye.